Wow, Tom. Now that is some intense scoring. Just really integrated and complex and layered and yeah, and just very deliberate too. Like your ideas are just absolutely really sure of themselves. Excuse me, sure of themselves, and yeah, it's just really fascinating. And like how you sort of build in little these little arpeggiando bars. There's one earlier where you have the harp doing something similar, which you kind of don't need, but like here, this is all good. All right, so we're just going to go back one page. Just in case anybody has missed it out there, I am evaluating these scores backwards, starting with section E and then jumping back to D, because that's where most of the new material is that people will not have heard me evaluate yet. And then I'll jump back to A, B, and C kind of at the end, because a lot of what I have to say in those scores, in those sections is already pretty well mined. I would say, after 50 or 60 scores or so. So let's take a look at this. Just start off with this. Now, like you chose to disobey Barvinsky's very specific instructions to not, like, this was supposed to be non-decrescendo, right? So you're like not supposed to get softer there, right? It's da 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 ba 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 bum, and then the music dies away, and what you're left with is just the octaves, as the pianist changes pedals, right? So like part of the challenge, the orchestrational challenge here was to emulate that, right, rather than put in a diminuendo. So it's okay, sometimes in the process of transcription we make decisions that go outside the natural scope of the piano score, and or maybe you just missed it, I don't know, but anyway. I think that what's cool about the way it's originally scored is that you just have this massive smashing around, and then things fade off very quickly, and then this solo voice emerges from the darkness, right? Anyway, but like all that aside, it's still pretty successfully scored. I would just say watch out. Like if your score does get performed a lot, you might want to go back over and like maybe bring some things more into line with Barvinsky, because like always a chance. You know, Probably very slim in the case of this score because it's so unfamiliar. But there's always a chance that somebody might say, "Well, wait a second. Isn't there supposed to be? There's this one cool little thing that Barvinsky does there." Or, so, anyways, starting off with harp here, kind of emerging from below, and this would actually be a pretty good little line. I would mark it solo. Put solo over the bar. And this is also something where you could split up the hands. Like, for instance, these first four notes could be played with the left hand, and then these next four with the right hand, and then these last four with the left hand. That's how I'd split it up. And then so just turn this into bass clef, and then have these notes kind of stems there, and then sort of like a split staff kind of a thing here with the B in the bass staff up here, and then and then dropping down to this in the left hand. Right. So here you have a muted trombone and F horn. Yeah. And then here we have in treble clef the same B as the trombone here. Yeah, I mean it's a little risky. You know, there's like the danger here is more to the double bass playing, because the trombone is just so much heavier and so much more secure in that register, whereas the double bass is just really kind of weak and vapid up there. I mean, not in its own rights, it's actually really got a beautiful sound way up high in its treble clef register, but the weight, even with your other instruments trying to hold back as much as they can, there's still really the reality that your double basses are going to get stomped on pretty heavily. Yeah, and we've also got this sort of strange thing where you've got, pretty much you've got score in C, but you've got horns in F and actually in the key of F, right? So look, if there's going to be a key signature, make sure that your horns are in the same key signature as everybody else, right? So horns in F wouldn't mean horns with a key signature of F. It would mean horns transposing an F as you read it. Just kind of as a little request from me. This is possibly something you forgot to do when you sent me the score, and it'll be on the checklist for next year. But if you could just put it back into transposing pitches, or to leave it in transposing pitches when you send it to me, it would be really awesome. Okay, so yeah, so I think this is very, very cool. Here you're saying mute, then open, and then yeah. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, so one of the things that we miss in writing and thinking in C with our transposing instruments is like kind of missing the context of how much effort something is, right? So, so here you're writing B in the middle of the staff, and that all seems pretty easy, at piano and so on. But what is the actual note is F sharp, right? So, I mean, sure, most horn players can easily play an F sharp and play it soft and so on and so forth. But that doesn't mean that it's like, it's kind of like the upper register of very fine nuances for the horn, right? And then as you getting up to G, and then A, and then God help us B and C, it becomes more and more about pressure and less about like finesse, right? So I mean, it's kind of the upper, so you might have made a different decision about this if it had been written in C and you were thinking about those particular peculiarities of your horn scoring. But, all that aside, there's some real lovely stuff going on here. I especially like the trumpets, right? And da 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 ba da. We really got the implied, the little implied leap right in there. So I thought that was really successful. All right, so just looking at the overall scoring and the effect, I think that you've got the whole idea of solitude in here really beautifully. I think you kept your upper part backed off. The way that this is scored with the brass kind of taking the melody and so on, and the strings kind of hovering in the background on tremolo with winds and so on, and at a soft dynamic. There's no question but that the melody is going to be the more powerful element here, more or less doubling in octaves with the trombones and so on, and the horns. And then, this little part coming in on top here. Yeah. So that pretty much works, and just like gorgeous harp rolls. Yeah, it's kind of strange though. Like here you have mezzo forte balances with this really well, and then you have a crescendo here in your horns and trumpets. By the way, really try to have like the horns and the heavy brass should share a bracket, and they should share a bar line. Okay, so just don't have these gaps in like this. All right, that's not concert scoring. Okay, just really fill this in. Just have this all one. And I know maybe you're thinking, oh yeah, well the horns are kind of a separate thing, and they're their own thing, and yeah, that's fine for whatever that philosophy may be. But in a professional concert score, it's got to be, the bar line has got to be for all the brass, and the bracket has to be for all the brass. If you're concerned about the horns looking individual, just add a sub bracket. Okay. All right. So, anyways, to get back to this, you are going crescendo, mezzo piano crescendo, piano crescendo. It's kind of, we're missing a crescendo mark here. And then you want your harp to play softer, right, over the same notes. So that harp is gone, pretty much. I think that you should keep this at mezzo forte, and if there's any crescendo, you should crescendo the harp, not diminuendo the harp. Maybe have it playing higher pitches, not the same pitches, sort of around the same area as the heavy brass or as the trumpets and horns. All right, so now getting into this area here. So you kind of have a transcription of the piano part onto the horn parts. Da 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 dum. And adding bassoon in there and some trumpets and so on. So you make up for the fact that there's the occasional fifth voice in and so on. So yeah, with some string accompaniment. I'm not so sure though about like how you have the strings kind of drop out, and I'm not so sure about like why the double basses are continuing to play in treble clef right in here and so on. In all honesty here, like this E, this tremolo E here, I'm just thinking like what is the harmonic for that? I think that this is available as a harmonic, as a natural harmonic on the double basses, in which case the cellos could be doing this, which is really more in their range and kind of more like, especially when you get to this point where you really want it to be expressive and to match, to match the power with the rest of the strings. In doubling with the brass, you would get a better effect. At the very, very least, I would say, if you're going for some sort of special effect here with high double basses, all cool, but you should have the cellos take over here, okay? Because like they're not doing anything else. And the double basses are never going to be able to balance, even with the violas, in the way that you've got this scored together. I appreciate that you are backing off the horns a bit here, but the trumpets here, but still. All right, and then getting to the very, very last little bit, I'm not so convinced about this timpani roll here, and I'm not so convinced about quintuple piano, right? It's a little late at this point for you to have read. You would not have been able to read my thoughts about extreme dynamics that I shared in a post on Orchestration Online. But go check it out. It's one of, like, if you just go to the homepage of orchestrationonline.com, you'll see the second post, and if you click on it, you can go to the first post from there, or just check it out in categories. Anyway, yeah, so I consider quintuple piano to basically be just like niente, just like right on the very, 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 very edge of hearing, or like almost like a whisper, almost like just like the what you're hearing is the sound of the mallets, the sound of the mallet on the skin of the drum, but you're not really hearing the pitch of the drum, right? It's that soft. And then triple P would be as soft as one could play musically, and then diminuendo to as soft as one could play non-musically. In other words, like losing qualities of nuance and things like that. So I really think that I would be. It'd be more interesting if you went up to pianissimo and then went down to triple P here at the end with everybody. I mean, I can, like, there are some instruments here that, like, I mean, I don't think could get down to a quadruple P. That would be like your bassoon and contrabassoon and your English horn, right? So those will be sticking out of the texture, and then very low tuba will also have a problem with that, and I think bass trombone, like mid register bass trombone perhaps, but like a low niente kind of a sound. Um, you know, Clarinets can do it all day. So if you want to put this in the clarinet and have it fade out to quadruple P, I was listening to this little addition in here, and I was thinking, could it be more Barvinsky based? Because it's a little bit, it feels a little bit more like a folk song. Like maybe "Goodbye Old Painter," da 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 da, kind of a thing. And I think maybe if it was more like maybe in the way that it was structured rhythmically, maybe if it were closer to the way that the Barvinsky melody flows, it could help tie things together a little bit more. I mean, yeah, you're going da 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 dum, but it's just the way that you see what I mean? It's like the durations of the notes, right? With the da 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 da, I think da 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 dum might fit in a little bit better with your scheme. All right, now here you've got the staggered entrances. Okay, all right, so sometimes with staggered entrances where you want everything to just really, like, especially with really adjacent players, like, say, second and first horn here, sometimes it's good to have like a little cue for the player who's playing later to just kind of show, like, you have this like this, first horn or excuse me, second horn and a mini note in the first horn part, just so that they can see that something is coming after them. And I would say, like, maybe the same thing with the tuba and the bass trombone, and possibly even the cellos and the double basses, just so that, like, they can kind of see, like, that there's something ahead of them, because otherwise you have players trying to kind of they might be thinking, well, I'm playing when that other person is playing, right, rather than understanding just from a first reading that they're going you do 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 do, right. I recently orchestrated a work where I had what sounded like a downbeat in the flute part, and then following it right afterwards was like pizzicato and staccato winds, pizzicato strings, staccato winds, doubling each other, and I gave them a cue that showed them where the flute part started, so that they would know, like, that wasn't the downbeat. So it's just that kind of thing, just kind of watching out where people go. Like, you might actually, for everybody who starts on the eighth, after the eighth rest, maybe just sort of like kind of show them where the previous beat fell. Yeah, yeah. I mean, most of this works for me. I like the doubling in here. I like the use of the strings in here. There was, yeah, I just kind of felt that a couple of these notes stuck out a little, like this B here in the double basses. It almost felt like it could have been softer, right? That the things sort of need to melt down a little bit more, as they go downwards, so that it's perfectly smooth. I mean, you can hear it on the mock-up. Like, one of these notes really sticks out. I believe it's this B here in the double basses. But that's, it's also possibly indicative of, Like, if everybody's going piano diminuendo, by the time you get to here, right, the players may are already be softening to the point where it'll stick out. I mean, especially if you have so much weight. You've got first bassoon and bass trombone also playing on that note. Maybe you don't need bass trombone there. Anyhow, or maybe you need your bass trombone to play like pianissimo already, right? Like there's a lot of balancing that, a lot of finessing the balance in here. I think here's where I would do it. There's some at the beginning of the piece where I think it's unnecessary. Here is where I would try to like if you're getting everything down to a really fine point, I would kind of much rather that your heavy brass, your lower heavy brass, we're starting at pianissimo, right, and then these other instruments were at piano, and then they would all go diminuendo together. But yeah. But I mean, just a really cool, such an awesome ending. And now back to D. All right, so there's a lot of cool stuff happening here, and one thing I want to say is that like I understand the incredible impulse, the desire, the the need for a composer to have a piccolo plus tuba solo together, right? It's and then or piccolo and contrabassoon, and like you can even hear that in I believe in like the opening of Star Wars. There's always like doo dee 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 kind of thing happening with piccolo and contrabassoon, which has just beautiful overtones in it. But like here, like I feel that it just is a problem because like part of the charm of this section here is that it's kind of floating along, right? Like we've had all these, like all of the, all of the kind of impressionistic color and quality kind of depends on this sort of hovering, right? Kind of hovering over the pedal tone, and in this case, like you do have the pedal tone of F sharp, and that's really great, but and sort of in a broken form, but we don't really have like like when you're putting the tuba down there in the middle of the pedal tone, kind of moving around, and the end, like instead of a long held note, you have like this. You're breaking it up into broken in octaves to sort of interpret the left hand part of the piano score. Then I just feel like the way that it kind of walks over it's just sort of hard to process, and I feel it's less clean than it could have been, and kind of not as much in the spirit of the piano score. But I mean, it's a really cool experiment. I'm not going to say that it completely doesn't work or anything like that, but yeah. Still, I mean, yeah, here you go, mezzo piano, diminuendo to piano, crescendo to mezzo piano, for reals, across 7 bars. Yeah, and this is going crescendo to mezzo forte. So shouldn't it be crescendo to mezzo forte by the end of this note, and then you can go back to mezzo piano? Yeah, just watch out for too much mezzoing around, right? Don't mezzo around. Like here we got like mezzo forte, mezzo piano, mezzo forte, massive crescendo from piano to mezzo piano, and so on. Just really watch out on your mezzo scoring, okay? It's like it's a way station. It's a moderated color. It's something you might use in like film scoring if you don't want to play. If you don't want the music to be too intense while people are talking, or while there are sort of audio effects happening. Okay, so aside from that comment about it, we have the melody fairly divided up, right? It's also in bassoons, right? And then we've got really really high piccolo note. And then there's a big separation between this and this D sharp here. So like over 2 octaves, right? So that also creates kind of weird overtones as well. And then we've got the harmonization very low in your clarinets. And so like I think that this is also contributing to a kind of a distraction from your cascading octaves, right? The little octaves kind of cascading downwards. How well do they connect? I mean, it's cool that you're going like flutes and then clarinets, and then there's like some violin here, and then we've got the cellos below, and so on, and some assistance here from contrabassoon. Yeah, but I mean, it seems like there's more focus here on the piccolo and tuba thing, right? So might be something you might want to rethink. But like, does it not work? No, I mean, it doesn't not work. But it's a bit of a coarse sound, as you know, like what you're hearing in the mock-up of just kind of things being kind of really uncomfortable sounding. That is kind of how it will sound in real life. Of course, more polished and more beautiful because it's with live instruments. This is kind of nice, bringing in this is just kind of welcome relief right in here to bring in a little bit more bring in a little bit more harmonic color, and then also to give some support to the cascading octaves here. And it's interesting, like how much a massive amount of power you get out of things just by really stacking all of the functions together, right? Just really having that, just a mass of chords, even though like it's really kind of mezzo forte, mezzo piano in the brass. I mean, that's a good balance right in there, and then pushing forwards to forte. So it's like it's the most Ravel-like place in in the piano prelude and in most of the orchestrations I'm noticing. Here, I would recommend you take a different approach. If you're going to have this much of a harmonic approach, okay, a couple of things. One is try to have more of your upper winds towards the upper part of the harmony, and then the lower winds not playing anything too complicated, anything too rich and too mid range. All right, and you try to keep the brass and the winds from overlapping too much. Maybe a little bit, with like say like oboes and trumpets playing together and things like that. That's kind of unavoidable. And then with your strings, try to play more octaves than play harmonies, right? Because the harmony is not necessarily going to come through, right? And the strings, it's just going to lessen the impact. Whereas if the strings are playing like one note per octave, right? Or if you have like say your firsts on this high B, right here in the flutes, and your seconds on this lower B, or if you were to have your firsts on this B up here in the piccolo, and your seconds playing the B below it, then you get this beautiful soaring string sound, and it's a cheat because it sounds as if the strings are harmonizing with the winds and the brass and so on, like they're all part of this big harmonic chord, but the strings are just playing octaves, right? So that might be something that you might want to think about right in here. See, because like you've got like looking forward, you've got like more octaves happening in your winds than you do in like the strings are kind of taking a lot of harmonic positions and so on, rather than just like the straight melodic expression of the octave. All right, okay, so I missed something here. I just really missed something here, and that is the foghorn. The boom, boom, kind of long dotted half notes. They're like you chose to instead interpret it as a kind of a bustle, bum 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 bum. And I mean that's all cool, but there is already that motion happening in the middle. Yeah, da 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 da. And like by turning it into the bass line as well, I feel we kind of lose that sense of just absolute solidity, like being rooted to the earth, right? Rooted to the earth, hands in the sky, or eyes in the head in the sky, let's say, and then just like hands flailing, arms flailing furiously, right? Is kind of the original piano score for this. So I think that we're missing that, and it's also making everything sound kind of a little brusque, yep, bop, 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 right, rather than like the kind of more grunting kind of barking kind of a sound. I think is getting a little bit lost here. Yeah. Right. Like, see, you're pushing up to a fortissimo here and a forte in the brass, which is cool. And you're starting from a forte and a mezzo forte. But like you could have pushed to forte in the brass and fortissimo in the other parts, and then ended up at triple F in your winds and strings and fortissimo in the brass, right? Okay. So, like, how well does it all work? Okay. I think that this works really great. Da-da! Right? I don't think this works so well. Bum bum. But I guess most of these are are playing the same pitch, so there aren't too many jumps. Like just this one in the piccolo. Now, just being aware that this is really going to cut into the ear. That's really high scoring here. And eventually you sort of climb down and then you climb up and then you back off a little bit and then you throw this back in again. So, maybe you don't really need to go for the highest note here. Maybe the piccolo could be doubling the your first violins and your first flute, right? Rather than soaring to this really high kind of ear-piercing octave. It's just like it's so much trebly color on top of like just the kind of very bustling yep up 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 up, right? It's kind of a fine balance of how much do you add, right? I mean, I really appreciate how full you have scored this motion and that you don't have too many breaks. So you're ignoring all of the little interim rests that were put in there so that one of the pianist's hands could reach over and play an octave or something like that, right? So there are these little gaps. I feel this gets to be a little regular though. This sort of this sort of barks around and then rests, ba 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 da, right? And then it does it again, right? So and again. So I'm just wondering if there's some way of kind of maybe certain elements, like maybe the repeated chords in the horns and trumpets could continue on, while this came to an end. Or maybe this could continue on while the repeated chords stopped. Or some other kind of thing to just sort of keep the energy going. It is nice that these players do get a breath, though. And, yeah, I mean, I just feel like, is the timpani overkill? Just going bong, 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 bong. What if the timpani just did, like, one massive boom? Just boom. Da, 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 ba, boom. Da, 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 ba, da, da, boom. Da, 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 da. You know what I mean? Just, I think that less is more, right? Just, like, one solid smack with the timpani at fortissimo or something. Just really probably would have more impact than 12 timpani notes in a row. Yeah. But I mean, it's like, and it's also like, one other kind of thing that I would mention about it, if there's any way to bring any sort of variation into it, like rather than scoring it the same way all the way through, all 10 bars. 10 or 11 bars. That's actually, there's a bit of a relief here, right? When, you sort of change the scoring, even though you go diminuendo, which I think is very naughty. No, it's cool. It's kind of neat that like that you have this sort of timpani melody in here. But look, wouldn't it be cool like if the timpani weren't so frequent and it was just hitting some solid downbeats because you don't have any foghorns going on in your low winds, low brass, low strings, and it just went thump, thump, like every bar, and then here da 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 da. It would have way more impact. But see, like here you've used up the audience's ear, and like their expectations, and it comes back and people are like, yeah, so what, Now the timpani was just banging around there, just like it did before. Right, so I'd just say like maybe proportions need to be adjusted a little bit, so that certain things have more impact and more more interest. Like I think that's kind of cool that you got the snare in there and stuff. I mean, it is very martial. It's very bellicose. Scoring right in here, yeah. Just very much aware of what is going on. Um, yeah, so I could probably go into more detail about some of this, but yeah, I think that's the kind of the general thing. One other thing is like if you're gonna have pitches that pretty much repeat across where other pitches are like going up and down, then what happens is the motion going up and down is swallowed by the repeated pitches. Right? So it would be better to try to keep one function out of the other. Right? If you notice in the piano score, just because like the guy doesn't have an extra hand, um, the the repeated notes that center around where the right hand melody octaves are, that's quite a bit higher, and then like the part where the left hand is expected to play is quite a bit lower, right? But like by kind of filling this out and filling it in and having more lower pitches and so on, it's yeah. As to your horn scoring, there are some things that are kind of nicely placed, like the interlocking of the voices. Second being the lowest middle, the third being the highest middle. But sometimes you sort of break that, right? Like for instance, right in here. I like the idea of the octaves playing though, like these octave Bs and yeah, but it's just a little strange. Might be safer just to kind of to keep the parts interlocked as much as possible. But this is just really cool. Da 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 dum. That all works for me. And now, finally, back to the beginning. Yeah. So, um, some general comments before we jump into it. Look, there are a few problems you solve and a few problems that you start, right? By having the by having more bottom end, right? So like part of it is like that there is definitely the pitch weight is in the upper middle register of the piano, kind of creating similar problems that we saw in the Faya excerpt that we had last year, and this you sort of solve that with like pizzicato and rolled harp and some other elements, right? This rolled timpani. Okay, all good. Now, the thing about it is though that like, I think you have to pick your pitches wisely, right? So like, so if you're going to go ba da 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 dum, you got it right in here. You're showing that it's a D major chord, but you're still in A minor with your left hand of the harp, and you're still playing A. So there's no sense of resolution here, right? There's no like you are giving us the mechanics of guiding us through guiding the ear through a series of chord changes, but then you're not following through, right? So shouldn't this be a D, right? And then change the pitches here. So maybe it just like would be a D fifth with a F sharp on top, and this would and then resolve to G, right? Or don't throw in the G, but just one way or another. Like like you've got to get to your 5 before you get to your 1. So like I'm not sensing like a kind of a jazz complexification of the cadence here, right? So, yeah. So yeah, so I would just say really watch out for that, right? And then by sitting on this A so much, when you give us this A, our ear is tired of it, right? And what's more, you're starting a timpani roll on a B, right? So what does that all mean? And then also, like by having this this pedal tone, are we perhaps spoiling the effect of the pedal tones in the next pages, right? Which you've chosen to, you know, kind of like not interpret with like a long held pedal tone, but with the interpretation of the left hand patterns. But then eventually we are going to get to places in the score where there definitely were long held notes and so on. So, all right. So, getting back to the beginning, it's all very cool scoring, and I mean there's just some things mechanically that don't quite add up, but yeah, we just also once again thinking about the proportions. So, heading into like what is how everything is all scored. Bum 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 bum. Yeah, with just like the little background cushioning of the tremolo, and flutes, octave flutes on top of bassoon thirds. That's all great. Da da. Right now here though, like see now we're starting to get a little bit more complex. Da 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 da. It's kind of cool that like here you have like the first oboe and second flute doubling, right? Kind of getting into a place where the first flute can't really communicate as much, and then you allow the first flute to go up while you hang on to this A. Right, and then clarinets are kind of playing, kind of filling out some of the middle voice and so on. Yeah, some of those things. I think that if you do A thirds here, you're taking away from the kind of the hanging C, the sort of that's kind of supporting note. There's like a supporting tied note of G here, right? That kind of goes across half the bar, and then there's a supporting tied note of C. So like by putting the A third under there, and by kind of not tying and so on in the clarinet, we sort of lose a little bit of that sense of suspension. And then da 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 da. Lots of credit for not just dropping in the piano slurs, the piano style slurs from the original piano score, though. That is very cool. But here you do have them, right? Although there isn't actually a slur in the piano, but it is of the kind of idiom of the piano, because like you were asking like an accent and then a tenuto, and you're slurring across the whole thing. I mean, you'd be better off just saying legato and not having any slurs, or just da ta 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 ta. It's just a little fiddly. Maybe a little over nuanced on the articulations. Was this possibly a response to the mock-up not quite enunciating these pitches quite clearly enough? But yeah, I wouldn't put the reason why would of course be because there's a slur across notes that are repeated, right? Okay. And wouldn't this be a little clearer? Ta ta rather than da da. Right? There's no ta. There's no emphasis. There's of articulation on these last two eighth notes. Yeah. But like it still is just really kind of beautiful effects. You progress the texture forwards. I love this just little kind of wind band scoring that you've got going on in here. Just a touch of tuba down at the bottom. And that bass pizzicato. It's very cool. I don't think you need mutes on your pizzicato bass. I think it's fine. I think they can be just as sneaky and blend in with the texture just as much as you like. Yeah, so just put the mutes on the instruments that are playing the tremolo. Okay. Yeah, and then this all winds down really beautifully. It's very nice, very deep scoring. But once again, it almost like is difficult. It's difficult to read in C. Like I wish that things really were in F over here, not just on the key signature. And now we get to the unfolding of the piece. It's just the beautiful the flower opening up, the sun rising, however you want to put it. And the thing I'm just sort of thinking about, looking at this, and having had just discussed D in such detail, I'm sort of wondering whether or not this is maybe a little too much, like too much of a look forward to what's going to happen there, or maybe what happens in the middle of D is a little too much like this. Just kind of dun 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 dun, like within some parts, right? Just kind of just repeating the notes instead of more climbing around. I will say one thing is that there's a bit of a like having everything moving in octaves like this. There's a kind of there's a real a kind of acrobatic quality to the music. Now here, like, while this is incredibly convenient for the composer, it's not so convenient for the conductor. Okay, it really, you cannot just go 2 1 2 1 2 1. These parts would have to be in second voice, right? Wherever you go to 2, that would have to be in second voice, and then the number 1 part would have to be in first voice. And then you don't have to write 2 1 2 1. You just like have you can see that the second voice part is a second voice because of the rest on top in the first voice, and then the first voice is obviously the first voice because the second voice has a rest, right? So that's how you have to do this. Them's the rules. I don't make them, I just carry them out. No, I don't. So like, yeah, and like, okay, and then here's another possible problem. While this is a very cool idea for the horn, like just kind of ripping up and down here, you have piano marked, and you're sending like this horn player is starting cold at piano on what for them is a high B, right? So that's just really not, exactly. They're high B. So it's really not quite. I mean, this would be a great English horn part, right? Like your English horn is tied up doing something else. Maybe you could swap it, right? But yeah, but like it's once again, it's a bit acrobatic, and like it's perfectly possible, and it's perfectly possible to play things like this smooth. But once again, this is the peril of scoring in C with horn, and like kind of not really having ingrained like the registers of the instruments. They don't seem to speak, right? So like you just would really have to just thump it into your brain that F is the highest note, and that like anything above the note of B in the C staff, like in reading in C, like the actual sounding note of B in the middle of the staff is gets progressively harder and harder to play and to control. And then also, like all of these places where the second horn dips way down, like all of that stuff would just seem a whole lot easier if you scored it in F, because then you could see that it is like only it's only a slight dip down from the range of the staff itself, the written staff. This part in here just really feels more like first and second horn, right? I mean, if you were to hold on to this and maybe shift around some of the pitches so that the horn doesn't have to go so high, I would really like swap these two staves. I'd give this part here more to the... I'd want my first and second horn to just really be inside the music and playing that melody, and But really, once again, I mean, I feel this is really much more of an English horn part than it is a French horn part. Not that there's anything French about the French horn or English about the English horn. The English horn is more German, like in terms of its invention. So just looking at, once we kind of get past that, like a lot of, it's really the repeated notes that seem to presage, to look forward to D, maybe in a way that's a little bit too much, But all that aside, how well is everything working? Well, like first and second violin, doubling piccolo on top, first flute and first oboe below. So that like here's the other thing. Like, are you using too much piccolo too soon? Right? Like here at the beginning, and then here we're using it a lot, and then and then going on, there's more and more piccolo. So like we don't quite even get a break until around C. So yeah, so there's just maybe proportionally some of these intense textures could be eased off a little bit, just so that like when you finally do have the maximum amount of impact in the middle, it really like it's a lot of it will feel new and fresh and like the bombasticness of it won't seem like just a teeny bit forward of where you were in softer sections in terms of like the mass of the scoring. Yeah. You might not need to mark a mezzo piano here. Piano crescendo forward, then down to pianissimo. Yeah, and then just first trumpet right in there. There's a lot about this that is really great. Not so sure about bass clarinet playing really low notes in there. I don't think that that's really necessary, like in terms of the whole scope. So, like, maybe just reining this in a little bit, like losing that octave below, and yeah, and this one on top. I'm not sure whether or not this is transposing. This is C scoring transposing or C scoring, at pitch, because there, some bass clarinet parts in C do either, which is just a further argument to not do that and just to score it everything in B flat, transposing at a major ninth. All right. Now, one thing that I really liked was how you pushed the texture forward here, and just was really massive, and then you just let go of it, and you had continuing on with forceful scoring, but like all in the winds. This spoils the broth. I don't know if this is intentional. I don't know, what is intended here by throwing in this D here, but it just kind of wrecks everything for everybody else. And also, like, there is zero need for you to go to treble clef until here. Okay? So, like, these Ds could easily be written, scored in bass clef. And then, like, here you are, it's just like you have all this really, really high stuff going on for your basses that are really more like cello parts, really, honestly speaking. And you already have your cellos divisi, and they're playing some of this and so on, and just how much more weight do you actually need on this? I don't really think you need that much weight. You don't really need that much support from the basses in here. Might be fun to play though. If you're a bassist and you're thinking, "Oh man, I want to play that," well, I can't blame you. But yeah. Anyway. Yeah, so it sounds, you can tell it's just like this one note here, this D is just like throwing everything off here in the, like, just you really have to keep everything just really stuck on E minor to make things work. And maybe this was a mistake, maybe like just a stray note. I've noticed a couple of other stray wrong notes, possible stray wrong notes. All right, and then you have this push into the B section. All right, so this is all really fun. I like the continuation of the brass in that lead roll, and then the contrast to the winds. It's all really beautiful, winds and horns. And this little tiny commentary here, and the strings going on, and then like drop to mezzo forte, and then I would almost say sub P, or P subito, right? Because you're just dropping off, otherwise players might be tempted to go diminuendo there. I think you want to really drop off the face of the earth here. Of course, mezzo forte, piano, mezzo piano in the middle. The conductor may tell everybody to throw in a diminuendo mark, so I think you better put in a subito piano here, sub P. All right, and then just this tailing off. This is really, really gorgeous scoring right in here. Be careful because oboe's English horn cannot go down to a quadruple P. Okay. No matter what Tchaikovsky says or writes, quadruple P should be niente, right? So, yeah, just triple P is fine. It'll be enough. It'll be enough of a soft texture over which the harp can play. Now, right here, you do not need this. All you need is a roll and a fermata, right? Just write out the roll in the right-hand chord and just put a fermata over it. And you'll get exactly the same effect, and you don't have to have this hiccup in the conducting, right? And then here, you don't need this marking either. Just ritardando, and then, a tempo. And here, I would say just like all of this accelerando, ritardando stuff, and that can all go. You just leave it up to the harpist ad libitum, right? So this cadenza ad libitum, and then maybe put in the ritardando. Get rid of this. Put in like ritardando a tempo, ritardando. And then meno here for everybody else. Then you can get rid of all this fiddly stuff. All right, and then this is all cool, About my only worry here is that the wandering melody is so overloaded. It's so huge. I complained a little bit in my last evaluation about an orchestrator adding an additional bass note here to sort of have it make sense and guide our ear to where to go when actually we're supposed to be wandering and not knowing where we're going. In this case, it's like a big, a bunch of people are wandering. It's almost like Canterbury Tales, right? Everybody is out there on that road kind of headed more or less in the same direction, right? So maybe like this, we're losing the sense of intimacy by having just this scoring be so gregarious and thick. Right, so it's not only less intimate, it's also less convincing in terms of like, the extreme sense of isolation that we just had, right? And it's almost like a reaction everybody has to kind of add together rather than underlining the previous emotion, the previous emotional scope, right? So just really watch out for, making it so heavy in here. Okay, so now we are back in this fun area here. So C. So this is where we're going to have to finish our lecture because the next section is D, which we already looked at. So yeah, so once again, you can't go 2 and then 1 and then 2 and then 1. You have to score 2 separate voices or have 2 separate staves. All right. So bum 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 dun, 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 bum 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 dun, dun, dun. Once again, I feel this is 3rd and 4th horn scoring, and this is 1st and 2nd horn scoring. Yeah. So it's a really like very thick kind of a texture, and kind of looking at the general trend, you had some very heavily scored textures already, and then here like you're really laying it on the thickest, and then we're going to continue on with very thick textures and so on. So might it be a good opportunity here to proportionally speaking to maybe ease off a bit and just kind of really simplify the colors and the scoring and make things really incredibly intimate, and then you can add on kind of score more at a distance when you get to this these kind of droplets of color and sound. But speaking as far as just like the scoring is concerned, it's really intense, but it still does work. The strings are not going to really contribute very much to the sound picture because you have got your trumpets and trombone so high, and you've got so much weight in the upper winds, right? So like the strings are adding a little bit of cushioning in the middle, but with I mean, you can mark this mezzo piano, but the first trumpet will still play louder, right? And then you have oboe on top of that, and then here you've got the trombone at the octave, and there isn't anything to really compete with it at first with the second violins, and then you have the violas below that. So the radiance of the trombone alone will be enough to kind of mess around with the functions that you've got going on here in your middle strings, right? So I just say, just really watch out, like the way that some of these are shaped, some of these textures are shaped. But anyhow, all these quibbles aside, there's no doubt that this is just some intense, full-blooded, very committed scoring. You have a really clear idea of what you want to do here. And I like it, part of me like suggesting alternate things to do. I'm actually feeling a little nervous about it, a little hesitant because, obviously you just, you really know what you want. The direction of your scoring is it's quite well worked out. And, but so it's just if any of my suggestions could guide you in the direction of perfecting the scoring that you've got, the approaches, the general plan, right? And if anything about the general plan that, any observations of like adjusting the proportions, if any of that is useful, then I'm happy. And if it's not, maybe, it will confirm your belief in your decisions, and that's good too, right? Sometimes somebody can like point XYZ out, and then you can like figure out why you did something and feel even more secure about it and know how to fix it in a way that makes you feel really happy and has nothing to do with the suggestion that was given you. So one way or another, I really appreciate you participating in this this round, and especially at the high level of dotted brev, and submitting a full-length score. And really, just having so many different colors and ideas and thoughts and so on, all communicated musically. And it's just so refreshing to see, one different orchestration approach after another on different on the same passage, the same section of music, the same piece. And I appreciate that, and I'm so happy that you were able to join us this year, and that you were able to help some other musicians who are in some pretty dire straits right now. And that really means a lot. So thank you for that, and thanks to all my Patreon supporters who likewise helped me this year and have in the past as well. And to all you website subscribers who are involved with this, and there are a couple more videos of your contributions coming up, your compilations of your thoughts. And then, to anybody out there who's just watching this and, and observing and enjoying these videos, I'm really glad that you have a chance, that you have the time to watch my evaluations. And for everybody out there who has some words of advice or thoughts or feedback, or even, or just praise or just offhand observations to throw Tom's way, then I think that would really be great. That would make me the happiest. Bigger than any compliment or expression of gratitude or any other kind of thing is like when I see people engaging heavily on one of these uploads. It just really makes my day to see so many comments on under a video. So please, jump in here. It can't just all be about me and what I think. Thank you all very, very much, and stay posted because there's yet another video coming today of one of these fantastic entries.